What's up, everyone? Jeremy Gerard with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. Now, these videos and kind of my channel as a whole really were started to help share my love of customizing Mythic Legions and hopefully to inspire others to do the same. I've had a number of people reach out to me to say that the work that I share on my Instagram, the tutorials that I share here on my YouTube page have helped them make that leap and give them the confidence to start customizing for themselves. Super excited to hear that. I love to hear that because, again, I really enjoy this hobby, so I'm happy to inspire others as well. On that note, I figured I would do a quick video covering my 5 tips how I would get started. I guess my 5 tips for getting started with customizing Mythic Legions. If you are a Mythic Legions collector and you haven't taken that leap yet to start customizing, you've seen a number of other people doing it and you're kind of intimidated because you see the paint jobs they do, you see some of the work and you're feeling like, I don't feel like I'm at that level. That's cool. None of us are at that level when we get started. So hopefully these 5 tips will kind of give you a roadmap that you can use to get started to do some really cool, really fun customs and projects right out of the gate and build up your skill set over time. Cool. All right, so let's number 1 here. So number 1 is start with what I call pop and swap customs. So pop and swap customs are simply mixing and matching parts from Mythic Legions figures. Now, these figures are meant to be super modular to begin with. Not only, a lot of them come with extra parts like extra heads and hands and, shoulder armor and so forth. So you are meant to pull them apart and combine them in different ways. And that is a great way. Just doing that, just popping them apart is a great way to get started on creating customs. Now, there are some people out there that will say this isn't customizing, this is kit bashing, and they'll look down on it. They'll kind of treat it as a lesser part of the customizing hobby because you're not adding custom paints or sculptures or whatever. Don't listen to that noise. Anytime you are changing the figures in any kind of way, I consider it customizing. So whether you want to call it kit bashing, whether you want to call it pop and swap, whether you want to call it customizing, it's all about having fun and creating some cool characters. All right. So let me show you a few things that I think will help you here. Number 1, what you're seeing on the screen right now, this is a photo that I took for an article on sourcehorseman.com about how to pop and swap these figures. So on the left, you can see a 1.0 style figure, the Templar Knight. And on the right, you can see the 2.0 style, which is the Goblin. There are slightly different body sizes for Mythic Legions, and the body parts are kind of within that style. So 1.0 parts, by and large, don't combine with 2.0 and vice versa. There are some exceptions. Certainly the shoulder armor on a 1.0 can go on a 2.0. It looks a little bulky, but it actually looks kind of cool. You might want to do that. So that's something totally different. I've actually done a whole video about using 2.0 parts on 1.0 and vice versa. But for the sake of this video, what I want to just show here is how modular these figures are. So if you're working with 1.0 style figures, say you've got some of the 1.0 skeletons or the Templars or, the Minotaurs, whatever you have, those parts do combine. You can swap the heads and the arms and the torsos, and you can see how they break apart here. They are incredibly modular. So just by doing that, you can combine those parts and you can create some very simple customs. Let me show you this one. This is an example of one that I did quite some time ago. So this is my Red Death, and all this figure here is a Black Knight Legion builder with a red skull from a Clavian and that red torso and loin piece from a Scapular, the Crypt Breaker. The Crypt Breaker. No, obviously you're looking at this and you're saying, oh, Clavian, Scapular, those are very expensive figures. But when I did this many years ago, they weren't so expensive. They were much more common. The point of this tip and the point of this photo that I'm showing here is that simply by combining parts, there's no custom paints on this. Actually, the only non-Mythic Legions piece on this is that soft goods robe, which is from a Star Wars Black Series Kylo Ren. But just by combining those parts, you end up with a totally new looking character, a totally unique looking figure that looks great in the display. And you can do this with lots of different figures just by combining the parts. Swapping them together, you can get some really, really cool looks. Another thing that you can do when it comes to just popping and swapping is you can start using some of the amazing third-party pieces that are out there. So a lot of the third-party pieces from like Legion Shop and Wolf King Customs, they come painted. You can buy them either unpainted that you can paint yourself, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you can also oftentimes buy painted pieces that you can just pop right onto the figures. So in addition to popping and swapping the parts from within Mythic Legions, you can start looking at those third-party companies that do offer painted pieces, get some of those, and pop those right on as well. So that's my first tip. Now, once you are kind of, working on that pop and swap and you want to take it to the next level, you're probably going to start wanting to add some simple paints. That's an awesome place to go. However, you do need to make an investment. So my second tip here is invest in quality tools, especially paints. Now, if you talk to Mythic Legions customizers and you ask them what paint they use, they're probably going to have a very strong opinion. Most customizers use one kind of paint or a couple kinds of paint, and they're very, very loyal to that brand. I've done videos on this channel about painting tips, my painting tips with the paints that I use and so forth. So I won't reiterate all of that, but I will repeat a little bit of it. Basically, when it comes to customizing these figures, you're going to want to use acrylic paints, and there's really two different categories of paints, I would say. A lot of brands, two categories. You're either going to go with the hobby store paints, which are more expensive, things like Vallejo and Citadel and Army Painter, or you're going to go with the less expensive hobby store, the hobby stores are the more expensive, the less expensive craft store paints, things that you get at like Michael's and AC Moore and Hobby Lobby, things like Deco Art and Craft Smart and Folk Art. A lot cheaper paints. Now, there are a lot of people that use those paints and they swear by them, and they absolutely say that, you can totally get the same quality paint jobs out of those paints that you can get out of the more expensive ones. I've seen some people use those cheaper paints and do amazing, amazing work. So I'm not saying they don't have a place. I actually use them quite often as well. What I will say is when you're first getting started, working with quality tools is going to make it easier. I can remember years ago trying to learn an instrument, and I remember a music teacher telling me that one of the biggest problems they see with new people picking up an instrument is they buy just a cheap, junky instrument to get started to see if they actually like it. And while there's some wisdom in not spending a ton of money on an instrument right out of the gate, the reality is a really cheap instrument is going to kind of work against you in a lot of ways, especially when you're learning. Whereas a better instrument is going to, right from the beginning, sound a little bit better, maybe give you a little bit more confidence to stick with it. I think the same thing applies to paints. Now, you don't need to invest in buy every color possible out there of the expensive paints, but I will suggest with my second tip here that investing in some quality is important. I like the Vallejo paints. You're going to pay probably, $6 for one bottle of these, and they're pretty small. If you buy a multi-pack, the price per bottle definitely comes down. That would be one of my suggestions, is buy a nice multi-pack of like Vallejo paints. I know a lot of people like the Citadel paints. I've got a couple of them. I prefer Vallejo, but Citadel are obviously great paints as well. These are what I'm talking about when I refer to hobby store paints. That's as opposed to something like this Deco Art or this Craft Smart. These are probably $2 for a much larger paint bottle. I love using these metallics, especially for these cheaper paints, especially when I do like different dry brushing effects, simply because the quality of the paint. You're putting so little paint on with that paint effect that the quality doesn't really matter, and the metallics work great. But my suggestion, invest in some quality paint, some quality brushes. These are Testors brushes. They're about like, $10 for the pack of 3 or something like that. I like these paints. These brushes, I think that if you go to like a Michael's Crafts or whatever, and you buy one of those huge assortments of paint brushes where you're getting like 20 brushes for like $5, those are not great brushes. They're not going to serve you really well. Outside of paint and brushes, other things that I certainly use in my customizing, X-Acto blades, super glue. I use a drill with drill bits. A lot of tools that I just have around the house. It's amazing the amount of stuff that goes into it. But once you're going to take that leap, once you want to start doing this, the reality is you are going to have to make an investment, just like any other hobby. If you were doing woodworking, you'd have to invest in tools, in quality materials, quality wood, quality, tools to work with that wood. So customizing action figures is no different. Tip number 3, set some realistic goals. So when people first get started customizing and they're ready to take that leap and they're ready to paint that first, say, third-party printed head, one of the mistakes I see a lot of people do is, like, say they're really into dwarves, right? So they say, well, I'm going to start with a dwarf, and they buy a custom dwarf head and they try to paint that as like one of their first projects. That is a tall order. Dwarves, any kind of human style faces, those are a lot more challenging. Realistically, anything that has eyes that need to look realistic are going to be more challenging. Anytime you have to paint match, that is going to be a lot more challenging as well. There's a lot of other pieces that are super easy to paint, and I suggest you start with those simply because it'll give you the experience of painting these type of pieces, of what goes into it, the painting, the prepping, the finishing, all of that goes into it. If you work with an easier piece, it will be easier for you to accomplish what you're setting out to do, and it gives you that confidence that you can build on. Let me show you an example of what I mean about a simple piece versus a much more complex piece, right? Okay, here. So on the left, you can see this is one of my custom turtle Akupara heads that was sold at Wolf King Customs. That is a super, super easy piece to paint. In this example, that custom that it's on, it's just on a Gonks, a Mythic Legions Gonks body, okay? So all I did, I actually painted the neck of Gonks to match the head, but I'm painting them to match together. So it's not like I'm trying to paint the head to match something else that exists. I'm painting them at the same time. And all that was a base coat of black spray paint with some green that was dry brushed on top of it. In dry brushing, I've done videos about how to do that as well. It's simply dipping your paintbrush in the paint and then drying it off almost completely on like a paper towel. So when you actually put that nearly dry brush onto the piece, it's really only catching the exposed details. It's a really simple paint technique that can pay big, big dividends when it comes to customizing. But that's all this is. It's a little bit of green dry brushing that I did a tiny little bit of metallic gold dry brushing on top just to give it a little sheen. And I took a fine brush and just painted his eyes. Super, super simple. Now compare that to the piece that's on the right, which is that half giant piece. That's a custom from Planetary Dog Toys. That is a much more complex piece. And actually, I have another shot of it. Let's actually bring up a better shot so you can see what I mean by that piece. This is much, much more challenging. So this piece here, you can see there's a couple things that had to go on. Number one, I mentioned that when you do a humanish style face, and you have to do those eyes. Eyes are very, very challenging. One of the ways that I find really kills a custom that makes it look, very amateurish is a poor job on the eyes. The rest can look really good, but if the eyes don't really look nice and sharp, it falls apart. If you look at existing Mythic Legions figures, that's one thing you can do is hold those existing Mythic Legions figures. Look at how the factory paints look. If you want your customs to blend in with Mythic Legions, you want to try to do things like they do at the factory. So look at the human characters, look at the dwarves, see how their eyes are painting. That's the bar you're trying to hit. And it's challenging. So you want to make sure that you set realistic goals. In this particular case, not only did I have to do the head here, but I had to also do that torso. And that's a good step into my fourth suggestion, or my fourth tip, which is take on a challenge. Once you've set realistic goals and you've started small and you've done projects that allow you to build up, you do want to challenge yourself. Because if you always work on the types of pieces you know you can execute very, very easily and very, very well, you're never going to grow as a customizer. You're never going to get better. So while I'm suggesting you may not want to start with a piece like you see on the screen right here, you definitely want to build up to it and challenge yourself. So in this particular case, not only did I have to do that head there, but I also had to try to paint match that flesh tone to the body I was using. I also used that large ogre scale torso that's also from Planetary Dog Toys, just like the head. So I had to try to paint match that flesh color to the flesh of the Balthal, the Tower ogre scale figure that I used as a base here. Paint matching is very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult because the paints that they use at the factory are not these. They don't use these types of paints at the factory. So you're not just going to get a bottle and just crack it open and be able to perfectly match an existing Mythic Legions figure. Now, there are occasions that that may happen. There are occasions that just by some kind of happy circumstance, the color that the figure is and the color in the bottle are so close that you just use it right out of the bottle and it works great. More often than not, it's a mixture. I see a lot of people on the Mythic Legions Cabal and on other groups talking about, does anyone have a good paint match recipe for this particular character or for this set of armor? Very, very common to ask that, and it is definitely difficult. Paint matching, especially paint matching armor and stuff, it's something that I certainly struggle with. After all the customs I've done, I still mightily struggle with that. So challenge yourself, find ways to mix paints, find ways to match, to do more detailed heads. That's how you are going to grow as a customizer. And you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're absolutely going to. That's okay. That's what helps you grow as well. And that brings us to my fifth and final tip here. And that one is customize for yourself, but share your work. And here's what I mean by that. When I say customize for yourself, I mean a few things. Do things that you want to do. Do things either for your collection that you want, or just, recipes and ideas that you want to see fully realized. I've done a lot of customs over the years that I did just to challenge myself, or because I said, hey, I wonder what a Mythic Legions version of this character or this type of race or this type of character class would look like. And I created that custom. Many of them I ended up selling. Many others I kept in my collection. So do things for yourself. Don't do them because you want to get a lot of likes on Instagram. Don't do them because you want everyone to tell you what a great job you did. Those are all wonderful things, and it's going to be the second part of what I talk about when I talk about sharing your work. But start for yourself. Do things you like. And the other part of that is, especially early on, if you start doing some really great work and you start sharing it, you're going to get contacted by people that want to pay you to do customs for them. They want to commission you to paint 3D heads or to put together full customs. And that's awesome. It's a great little lucrative side hustle that can help bring in maybe some extra money to help fund your collection, right? I help run Legion Shop, and Legion Shop employs a number of customizers, custom painters, and so forth. But the reality is, painting for actual commissions, painting for customers, is really, really challenging. I've had many, many people that I've taken their commissions over the years where I say, hey, it's going to take me a little while. And they say, oh, I totally understand. And then before you know it, 2 days later, they're like, hey, have you made any progress yet? And no, I haven't even started yet. And I know a lot of my fellow customizers don't even take commissions for that exact reason. I don't take commissions anymore for that exact reason, because painting as a job, painting against a commission, against a deadline, whatever, is very, very challenging. So I'm not saying don't ever do it, but I'm saying as you first get started, get some experience under your belt, find your love of this hobby, find your love of customizing before you try to turn it into a side hustle business. Because I know so many people that once they start doing it for it being a business and they start not being able to have time to do it for themselves, they lose their love of what got them going in the first place. And that's just super unfortunate. The second part of this tip here is share your work. So one of the coolest things is being able to share it with others, to get their feedback, to inspire them maybe to do something. I mean, when I first started sharing my customs, I had no idea that I would be where I am today, working with Four Horsemen Studios, doing my weekly Mythic Conversation show, working with Wolf King and Legion Shop. None of that I think was going to happen. I just enjoyed customizing. I wanted to share it with others because I enjoyed what I was doing and I wanted to share that love. Come from that perspective, share your work, take some feedback. That will help you grow as well. But don't chase those likes. If you start, like I said, with doing what you want to do for yourself, whether you get 10 likes or 10,000 likes on that Instagram post doesn't matter, because you did it for yourself, and that's what is important. So ultimately, those are my 5 tips. Start with some pop and swap customs, really, really simple stuff to get going and familiarize yourself with the way these figures are built. Invest in some quality tools. If you want to start painting, you need some good paints, you need some good brushes, and you need a number of other tools as well. If you're gonna be a customizer, the pieces that you work with, the materials you work with definitely matter. Set realistic goals. Don't dive right into the deep end right from the beginning. Work your way up there, build yourself, build your experience, build your confidence over time. Take on a challenge. As you start getting more comfortable, do things that you don't know if you're going to do well. Do things that you don't know if you're going to execute, because pushing yourself is how you grow. Being uncomfortable and challenging yourself is how you grow. And finally, make the work that you want for yourself. Make the work that makes you happy and share that work with the community. Hopefully this video helps. Hopefully all my videos help you out and you enjoy them. If so, certainly give the video a like. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. Definitely appreciate that. Until next time, I can't wait to see what you make.